Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska, and this is the news. Yesterday, 2 helicopters violated Polish airspace near Białowieża, following the escalation of hostile actions by Minsk and Moscow. Today, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki met with Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda in Suwałki. The Suwałki Gap is particularly vulnerable to Russian threats due to its proximity to the Kaliningrad region. We respond very strongly to these Russian and Belarusian provocations, of which Wagner's group is an instrument. Like Poland, Lithuania also faces Belarusian hybrid attacks. Vilnius is particularly concerned about the activity of the Wagner group in Belarus. We strengthened the protection of our border after the Wagner group began deploying its units in Belarus. We see that a military group in Belarus can be a big temptation for Lukashenko and Putin to use them to provoke against NATO countries. On August 1st, 2 Belarusian helicopters flew into Polish airspace for about 10 minutes. Due to their low trajectory, they were not spotted by radars. Every situation must be properly identified, and lessons must be learned for the future. And no doubt lessons are also being learned from what happened around Białowieża. According to reports from the services, a group of about 100 mercenaries from under the Wagner sign has gathered in the vicinity of the Suwałki Gap. Today, Radosław Sikorski, commenting on the latest Belarusian provocation, argued that the helicopters that were in the Polish sky should have been shot down. If those helicopters flew on the Polish side for 10 minutes, there was plenty of time to shoot them down. So you think they should have been shot down? Well, if Wagner groups had crossed the Polish border, what would you have done with them? Such statements would be in place if they were articulated by the Kremlin media. They would be in place if they were treated as a kind of provocation, but they are a manifestation of an experience. The Belarusian people are being suppressed by Alexander Lukashenko. Any expression of dissent is severely punished. Polish journalist Andrzej Poczobut has been sentenced to 8 years in a gulag. At the moment, there is a situation where civil society in Belarus is dead because of the fact that there is permanent repression by the Belarusian authorities, and most of the active opposition has gone into exile. Meanwhile, as Voice of America reported, citing International Criminal Court in The Hague, President Piotr Hofmański, the tribunal is studying the possibility of issuing a new arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. This has to do with war crimes committed by the Wagner group. The tribunal had already issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin earlier this year in March. Due to recent events, the Polish army has regrouped combat helicopters from the 1st Airborne Brigade of the Land Forces and the 25th Air Cavalry Brigade near the border with Belarus. Pilots who built their experience during missions in the Middle East will be stationed there. Air defenses destroyed 18 Russian drones attacking Kyiv tonight. According to preliminary information, there were no casualties or damage in the capital. Meanwhile, occupying Russian troops have sown landmines and booby traps across hundreds of miles of Ukrainians' front. Kyiv's commanders describe the tactic as the primary reason why their long-awaited summer counteroffensive has slowed to a crawl. The night alert in Kyiv lasted exactly 3 hours. It was the 820th air alert for the capital since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion. Russian terrorists also attacked Kherson today. One of the targets was again an Orthodox cathedral, where firefighting operations were underway after the previous shelling. 4 rescue workers were wounded. A trolley bus traveling next to the cathedral was also damaged in the attack on civilian targets. 3 passengers were injured. Andriy Yermak, head of the Ukrainian president's office, indicated that the Russians shelled Kherson with artillery. Meanwhile, at the front lines of the war, when the Ukrainian deminers found the bodies of Russian troops at an abandoned position, something about the corpses looked wrong. 47-year-old sapper Volodymyr has possibly the most dangerous job in Ukraine, clearing landmines at the front. Every day brings deadly risk, trying to make the ground safe, first for their fellow soldiers to advance, and eventually for civilians to go home. Deminers like Volodymyr use kittens, which are folding steel hooks that sappers use to dislodge booby traps, nicknamed for its retractable tongues that spring out like cat's claws.
200 meters from the bridge was a Russian position. There were 3 or 4 of their dead. 2 guys were lying on each other, which made it suspicious, because if there had been an explosion, they would have been thrown in different directions. But here one was lying on the other. We did well by not touching them, because when we reached there with a kitten hook, we saw that under them was a Soviet-era anti-personnel mine. It exploded and blew up both of them. But we stayed safe, thank God. Russians even mine their own brothers in arms. They say that they'd never abandon one of their own kind. However, when they leave their positions, they plant quite a lot of explosives under their own soldiers. Why are they doing this? Because they know that our med evacuation groups lift the wounded and the dead, under which they then find these explosives. And this is very dangerous for us. Landmines inflicted a colossal toll in the first month of the counteroffensive launched in June. Since the mines forced commanders to slowly advance, the number of wounded arriving at the hospitals has dramatically decreased. However, the sappers are still getting killed. Meanwhile, Ukraine's factories have tooled up to make equipment to help keep the sappers safer. In addition to the kitten hooks, Volodymyr's unit has been sent spider boots, which lift each foot off the ground on 4 metal legs, so any blast they set off will not be triggered directly under a sapper's body. They are made by Ihor Efimenko at a factory in Kyiv based on a modified Canadian prototype. One of my relatives lost a toe because he stepped on a butterfly anti-personnel mine. This shocked me, so I started thinking about ways to prevent such injuries. Working in the production of protection gear, I turned to Ukraine State Emergency Services with my idea. I had a prototype of some kind of steel boots at that stage. They rejected this idea categorically and inspired us to follow this type of boots instead. Oleksandr, the medic treating sappers at the front, knows the danger won't end soon. We would have liked to just wake up one day as if it were a nightmare, a bad dream, and we'd just shrug it off, wash it with cold water, and all of it would remain somewhere behind. But this is the reality.
Earlier today, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged all countries at the United Nations to tell Russia to stop using the Black Sea as blackmail after it quit a deal that had allowed Ukraine to safely ship its grain to global markets.
Hunger must not be weaponized. I urge all member states to join this communique. We also must significantly increase aid to tackle extreme hunger and to avert famine. I'm also announcing $362 million more to tackle the drivers of food insecurity and to enhance resilience in Haiti and 11 African countries, like getting nutritious food to pregnant women and helping farmers grow hardier and more diverse crops. Finally, we must address Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and the resulting assault on the global food system. This past year, the Black Sea Grain Initiative, negotiated by the United Nations and Turkey, delivered over 32 million tons of Ukrainian foodstuffs to the world. Wheat exports alone were the equivalent of 18 billion loaves of bread. 18 billion loaves of bread. Over half the food products exported through this effort, and 2/3 of the wheat, went to developing countries. These shipments helped to lower global food prices for everyone by roughly a quarter since Russia's full-scale invasion. Since Russia pulled out of the arrangement on July 17th, ignoring the world's appeals, grain prices have risen by more than 8% around the world. Kenya's foreign ministry called Russia's move, and I quote, a stab in the back. The Kremlin claims that it tore up the deal because international sanctions were restricting its agricultural exports. In reality, sanctions explicitly exclude food and fertilizer. In fact, at the time it abandoned the initiative, Russia was exporting more grain at higher prices than ever before. And what has Russia's response been to the world's distress and outrage? Bombing Ukrainian granaries, mining port entrances, threatening to attack any vessel in the Black Sea, no matter its flag, no matter its cargo.
Nearly 750 millimeters of rain per square meter has fallen in Beijing since Saturday. It is considered the heaviest rainfall in the Chinese capital in 140 years. At least 20 people have died as a result of the torrential downpours and flooding, and dozens have been reported missing.
Manpower reinforcements dispatched by central government authorities to Juazhu City of North China's Hebei province, hit hard by torrential rain-triggered floods, have arrived at the disaster areas in the city to carry out rescue work and rush against time to evacuate the affected residents. On Wednesday, the National Fire and Rescue Administration dispatched 500 firefighters from Hebei's neighboring province of Shandong, as well as a team of flood rescue experts to aid Juazhu City, home to some 700,000 residents. It is one of the worst hit areas in the recent downpours and floods that have wreaked havoc on North China. Earlier today, rescuers were deployed to different directions in the city to evacuate the trapped residents, send supplies to aid those in need, and clear sludge and rubble off roads. In Dongguan village, more than 200 residents were trapped by the floods. The village was virtually cut off from the outside world, with the floodwater depth reaching 2.5 meters. Rescuers from Zibo City of Shandong province drove speedboats to evacuate trapped villagers to safety. Some people were transported to safe places by a bulldozer, where the water level is relatively low. Due to the impact of Typhoon Doksuri, the fifth typhoon of this year, a total of 9 cities as well as the Xiangyang New area in the southwest of Hebei have been affected by floods. Rescue efforts are also underway for other cities in the province, including Langfang in the southeast, where floodwater has pooled up to 1.5 meters deep.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.